Here's something that might surprise you. In 1952, a modestly powered British saloon with a four-cylinder engine finished second overall at the Monte Carlo Rally. The driver? A young man named Sterling Moss. The car? A Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark II. While Moss would go on to become one of Formula One's greatest drivers, that winter night on the Alpine roads showed something remarkable. You didn't need exotic machinery to beat the best in Europe. You needed reliability, planning, and a car that wouldn't quit. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 is a car that most Americans have never heard of, and that's a shame. While you were buying Chevrolets and Fords in the early 1950s, this British sports saloon was embarrassing far more expensive machinery on the toughest rallies in the world. It could genuinely reach 90 miles per hour, giving it its name. It looked elegant without being pretentious, and it proved that badge engineering, done right, could create something special. But there's a bittersweet ending to this story. Just as the Sunbeam Talbot 90 was proving itself as a genuine sporting machine, the Roots Group decided to kill it. Not because it was failing, but because it was succeeding too well. They needed to make room for the Hillman Minx-based Sunbeam Rapier, a car built on cheaper underpinnings that could be produced in higher volumes. It was a business decision that made perfect sense on paper. Whether it was the right decision for enthusiasts is another matter entirely. To understand what happened, we need to look at post-war Britain. The country was rebuilding, materials were scarce, and petrol was rationed. Yet there was optimism in the air. The Roots Group, one of Britain's largest automakers, saw an opportunity. They would take their Hillman and Humber mechanical components and wrap them in stylish bodywork bearing prestigious names. The Sunbeam Talbot was born from this strategy, and against all odds, it became something more than just a parts bin special wearing fancy clothes. Section 1. The birth of a rally legend. In June of 1948, the Roots Group unveiled two new models at their Ryton-on-Dunsmore factory, the Sunbeam Talbot 80 and the Sunbeam Talbot 90. Both featured completely new streamlined bodywork with flowing front fenders and integrated headlights, a design that designer Ted White acknowledged was inspired by pre-war Packards. The styling was reminiscent of fighter aircraft, something buyers fresh from World War II would have recognized immediately. The 90 was the larger-engined model, featuring a 1,944 cubic centimeter, four-cylinder, overhead valve engine, producing 64 brake horsepower at 4,100 revolutions per minute. This was derived from the Humber Hawk engine itself, based on the 1937 Hillman 14. It doesn't sound like much today, but remember, these were overhead valves in an era when many British manufacturers still used side valve designs. This was genuinely modern for 1948. The chassis was old-fashioned by modern standards, with beam axles and semi-elliptic leaf springs all around. But it worked. The car weighed 2,940 pounds and could reach 80 miles per hour. Perhaps more importantly, it was well built and reliable. The Motor magazine tested one and found it capable and refined, with reasonable performance and excellent road manners. Roots offered the 90 inches two body styles, a four-door sports saloon and a two-door drop-head coupe. The saloon featured a distinctive pillarless design on the rear doors, with the glass flowing seamlessly into the rear quarter window. Both versions wore rear wheel spats, giving the car an elegant, aerodynamic appearance. The bodies were built by British light steel pressings, though the drop-head coupe shells were completed by Thrupp and Maberly coach builders. Production of this first Mark I version continued until 1950, with approximately 4,000 units built. But the Roots competition department, led by Norman Garrard, had already started entering these cars in rallies. They were testing them, learning from them, and preparing for what would become one of the most successful rally programs of the early 1950s. Section 2. Rally success that shocked everyone. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 began proving itself almost immediately. In 1948, entries secured class victories at the Alpine Rally. These weren't modified race cars. They were essentially production vehicles with minimal preparation. The success caught attention, but many observers assumed it was luck. They were wrong. In 1949 and 1950, Sunbeam Talbot teams won the team prize at the Monte Carlo Rally and finished second overall. The cars were demonstrating something crucial. Reliability mattered more than raw speed. While more powerful machinery broke down on treacherous mountain roads, the Talbots kept running. Then came September 1950 and a significant upgrade. The Mark II version debuted with a redesigned chassis featuring independent front suspension using coil springs and wishbones. The engine was enlarged to 2,267 cubic centimeters by increasing the bore from 75 to 81 millimeters. Power increased to 70 brake horsepower, and the car could now genuinely deliver on its 90 miles per hour namesake claim. The front styling was modified. Headlights were raised 3 inches to meet international regulations, and the fog and driving lights were replaced with small air intake grills. This wasn't just cosmetic. It improved cooling and met American export requirements. The Motor magazine tested a Mark II coupe in 1952 and recorded a top speed of 85.2 miles per hour with 0 to 60 acceleration in 20.2 seconds. Fuel consumption was 22.5 miles per imperial gallon, but the real validation came on the rally stages. In 1952, the Sunbeam Talbot team achieved an extraordinary performance at the Alpine Rally. They won the 2 to 3 litre class with first, second, and third places. They secured 3 Coupe des Alpes for penalty-free performance. They won the manufacturer's team prize. And they received a special cup for outstanding performance. The 1952 Monte Carlo Rally proved equally dramatic. Stirling Moss, co-driven by Desmond Scannell and John Cooper, drove a Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark II to second place overall. This wasn't second in class. This was second against everything from Grand Prix Ferraris to works Jaguars. A modest 4-door saloon with a 4-cylinder engine had beaten nearly everything in Europe. Section 3. The Mark IIIA refinement. For September 1952, Roots introduced the Mark IIIA with further improvements addressing the lessons learned from competition. The brake drum width increased from 1 3/4 inches to 2 1/4 inches, increasing friction area by 28%. To aid brake cooling, the wheels were changed to a ventilated design with smaller hubcaps. The rear wheel spats were eliminated for better cooling and simpler maintenance. The engine received the Alpine high-compression cylinder head with a compression ratio of 7.4 to 2 to 1, raising output to 77 brake horsepower. The steering was improved with a higher-geared steering box requiring only 2 1/2 turns lock-to-lock, making the car more responsive on twisty rally stages. The Motor magazine tested a Mark IIIA and recorded improved performance. The higher compression engine and better gearing made it feel livelier, and the improved brakes inspired more confidence on demanding roads. The test car cost £1,393, including taxes, positioning it as a premium offering compared to standard family saloons. Production of the Mark IIA ran from 1952 until October 1954, with approximately 5,397 units built. This would prove to be the last car to bear the Sunbeam Talbot name, but before it ended, it would add one more triumph to the record books. In 1954, Stirling Moss achieved something remarkable at the Alpine Rally. Driving a works-prepared car registered MKV-21, he completed his 3rd consecutive penalty-free run at the Alpine Rally, earning him the Coupe d'Or Gold Cup. This was the first year in the Sunbeam Alpine derivative, but his first Gold Cup win in 1952 had been in a Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark II. 3 years, 3 perfect scores. That's the kind of reliability that builds reputations. Section 4. The corporate decision. By 1954, the Roots Group faced a strategic decision. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 was successful on rally stages and respected by quality-conscious buyers. but it was expensive to produce. The separate chassis, hand-finished drop-head coupe bodies from Thrupp and Maberly, and relatively low production volumes meant healthy profit margins per car, but limited total sales. Meanwhile, Rootes was developing the Audax platform featuring modern unitary construction. It could be produced efficiently in higher volumes and underpin multiple models across different brands, Hillman, Singer, and Sunbeam. The British market was changing. Buyers wanted modern styling with American-influenced tail fins and chrome. They wanted lower prices and better fuel economy. The Sunbeam Talbot 90, despite its rallying glory, was essentially a pre-war design updated with modern mechanicals. Another factor complicated matters: confusion with the French Talbot marque. Having two different Talbots in the market created complications. Rootes decided to drop the Talbot name entirely from their sporting line. In 1954, the Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark IIA became simply the Sunbeam Mark III. The Talbot name disappeared. The car received larger front air intakes, 3 decorative portholes on each side of the bonnet near the windscreen, and duotone paint schemes. Engine power increased to 80 brake horsepower, and overdrive became optional. The Motor magazine tested a Mark III in 1955 and recorded a top speed of 93.6 miles per hour and 0 to 60 acceleration in 17.4 seconds. The drophead coupe was discontinued in 1955, leaving only the saloon. Production continued through 1956 and into early 1957, but everyone knew the end was near. In October 1955, Rootes had already shown the car that would replace it: the Sunbeam Rapier. Section 5, the Hillman solution. The Sunbeam Rapier represented everything the new Rootes Group strategy demanded. Styled by Raymond Loewy's design organization with clear influence from 1953 Studebaker coupes, it was a handsome two-door hardtop with pillarless side glass and American-influenced styling. It looked modern, where the Mark III looked elegant, but dated. More importantly, it shared its basic Audax platform with the Hillman Minx and Singer Gazelle. The engine was a tuned version of the 1,390 cubic centimeter Hillman Minx unit, producing 62 brake horsepower. This was less power than the Sunbeam Talbot 90, but the Rapier was lighter and more economical. It could reach 86 miles per hour and delivered sprightly performance for its era. The manufacturing process was telling. Bodies were stamped at pressed steel in Cowley, shipped to Thrupp and Maberly in North London for painting and trimming, then shipped again to the Ryton plant for final assembly. This was more complex than Rootes wanted, but it allowed them to leverage existing facilities while building up volume production capabilities. The Rapier cost significantly less to produce than the Sunbeam Talbot 90 Pi. By sharing components with the Hillman Minx, Rootes achieved economies of scale that the low-volume Talbot could never match. The Rapier could be built in quantities of 15,000 units per year or more. The Mark III, at its peak, managed perhaps 500 to 1,000 annually. From a business perspective, the decision made perfect sense. The Rapier would sell in higher volumes, generate better profits, and position Sunbeam as a sporting brand built on proven, economical underpinnings. The separate chassis Sunbeam Talbot 90, for all its rally success, was simply too expensive to justify continued production. Section 6. What was lost? The Rapier proved successful, selling well through the early 1960s and eventually spawning the well-regarded Sunbeam Alpine sports car. The Audax platform proved versatile and profitable, exactly as intended. But something authentic disappeared. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 wasn't trying to be a budget car with sporting pretensions. It was genuinely capable machinery that had proven itself against Europe's best. Critics noted the Rapier was a Hillman Minx wearing a party dress. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 had been more substantial. Consider the specifications. The final Mark III offered 80 brake horsepower from 2,267 cubic centimeters, independent front suspension, improved brakes, and proven durability. It cruised comfortably at 80 miles per hour all day with quality materials and thoughtful design. The Rapier offered 62 brake horsepower from 1,390 cubic centimeters in Series 1 form. Lighter weight gave it reasonable acceleration, but it lacked the character and long-legged cruising ability. Later series would improve performance, but the basic character remained: economy car mechanicals in attractive packaging. Racing driver Jim Clark's story illustrates the regard these cars commanded. The future two-time Formula One world champion drove a Sunbeam Mark III in his early competitive outings in 1956, running sprints and driving tests around the Scottish borders. He chose it because it was a proper sporting machine that could teach car control. Section 7. Production numbers and legacy. Let's talk numbers, because they tell the story of what the Roots Group accomplished and what they gave up. Total production of the Sunbeam Talbot, 90 across all variants, exceeded 24,000 units. The Mark I accounted for approximately 4,000 cars. The Mark II, produced from 1950 to 1952, built around 9,708 units. The Mark IIIA added roughly 5,397 more. The final Sunbeam Mark III, from 1954 to 1957, probably contributed another few thousand. These aren't huge numbers by mass market standards. For comparison, Hillman was building tens of thousands of Minxes annually, but these weren't supposed to be volume cars. They were premium offerings that commanded prices roughly double what you'd pay for a basic Hillman. At £1,393 in 1952, a Sunbeam Talbot 90 Mark III cost serious money. The drophead coupes were particularly rare. Production numbers aren't precisely documented, but estimates suggest only around 500 Mark II and Mark IA dropheads were built. Today, these are highly sought after, with good examples commanding premium prices at auction. The Sunbeam Rapier that replaced the Mark III proved far more successful in volume terms. Series 1 production from 1955 to 1958 totaled 7,477 units. Series 2 built 15,151 cars. Series 3 added 15,368. Series 3 EA contributed 17,354. By the time you reach Series 4 and V in the mid-60s, production began declining, but total Rapier production through 1967 exceeded 60,000 units. From Roots' perspective, this vindicated their decision. The Rapier outsold the entire Sunbeam Talbot 90 production run in just its first 3 series. But volume isn't everything. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 had established Sunbeam as a serious sporting mark through competition success. The Rapier inherited that reputation without quite earning it the same way. Section 8. The competition pedigree. We should return to those rally results, because they weren't flukes. The Sunbeam Talbot Works team, managed by Norman Garrard, approached competition with professionalism that presaged modern factory rally operations. They prepared cars carefully, chose talented drivers, and focused on events where reliability mattered more than outright speed. The 1952 Alpine Rally Sweep remains the high point. 6 factory-prepared Mark II cars entered, all finished without penalty, securing not just class honors but demonstrating the kind of reliability that impressed even skeptical observers. Sterling Moss and John Cutts won their class and secured a Coupe des Alpes. So did Mike Hawthorne with W.R. Chipperton and several others. The manufacturer's team prize was never in doubt. At the 1952 Monte Carlo Rally, Moss's second place overall made headlines across Europe. Here was a saloon car, available to the public, beating purpose-built racing machinery. The winning margin was close enough that with slightly better conditions, the Sunbeam Talbot might have won outright. That's how competitive these cars were. Female driver Sheila Van Dam also achieved significant success, earning the Coupe des Dames at the 1953 Alpine Rally in car MKV 25. The following year, she continued campaigning the works cars successfully. This wasn't tokenism. Van Dam was genuinely quick and demonstrated that the Sunbeam Talbot's forgiving handling suited drivers of varying experience levels. The 1955 Monte Carlo Rally provided one final triumph. By then, the car had been rebadged as simply Sunbeam Mark III, and the works team had shifted focus to the Alpine sports car. But privateers Per Morling and Gunnar Fadum drove a Mark III to outright victory, proving that even as Roots was phasing out the model, it remained competitive. These competition successes weren't marketing exercises, they sold cars. Buyers who read about Sterling Moss finishing second at Monte Carlo or winning the Alpine Gold Cup wanted the same machine. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 earned its reputation through genuine achievement, not advertising copy. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 story illustrates something we see repeatedly in automotive history. Sometimes, the most authentic products get replaced by more practical alternatives. The business case for killing the Sunbeam Talbot 90 inches favor of the Hillman-based Rapier was unassailable. Roots needed volume production, shared components, and modern styling to compete in the changing British market of the mid-1950s. But something was lost. The Mark III Sunbeam that ended production in 1957 represented a different approach to sporting motoring. It wasn't pretending to be something it wasn't. It didn't rely entirely on styling to create sporting character. It had proven itself on the toughest rally stages in Europe with genuine competition success. The Sunbeam Rapier became a successful model in its own right, evolving through multiple series and eventually helping establish the later Alpine sports car. But it was fundamentally a different type of vehicle, an economy car platform dressed up with sporting trim. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 had been the genuine article. Today, survivors are treasured by enthusiasts who understand what these cars represented. Good examples command respect at classic car events, and restored Mark III saloons and drop-head coupes bring strong prices when they come to market. The competition cars have their own special status. Sterling Moss's 1953 Monte Carlo entry, after spending decades as a pig-hauling farm vehicle in a barn, was restored and now appears at prestigious events like the Goodwood Revival. If you own a Sunbeam Talbot 90, or if you remember these cars from period, I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. Did you rally one? Did you drive one on British roads when it was just a used car rather than a classic? What memories do you have of these elegant, capable machines that could genuinely run with Jaguars on mountain roads? And if you found this history interesting, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. There are more stories like this, won cars that achieved remarkable things before business realities ended their production. The Sunbeam Talbot 90 deserves to be remembered, not just as a footnote in Roots Group history, but as a genuine sporting saloon that beat far more exotic machinery when it mattered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.